Commander Kethva stood on the observation deck of the last orbital station around Kepler 442b. Below him, his homeworld was dying. The once blue oceans had turned red from the radiation. The green forests were now black ash. Their sun, which had given life to his people for millions of years, was slowly killing them. The Zilani had been a proud race. They built beautiful cities that reached toward the sky. They created art that could make anyone cry with joy. They developed technology that helped them live in peace for thousands of years. But none of that mattered now. Their son was sick, and it was getting worse every day. Kethva looked at the datapad in his four-fingered hands. The numbers were clear and terrible. They had maybe 3 months before the radiation became so strong that even their underground shelters would not protect them. 4,700,000,000 Zilani would die unless they found somewhere else to live. He turned away from the window and walked to the communication center. The room was filled with his best officers, all working desperately to find hope where none seemed to exist. Lieutenant Zarane looked up at him with her large, dark eyes. Even she, usually so cheerful, looked defeated. "Commander," she said in their musical language, "we have received responses from the Altarian Federation." Kethva felt his heart beat faster. The Altarians were the strongest power in this part of the galaxy. If anyone could help them, it would be them. "What did they say?" Zarane's face fell. "They said no. They claim our people would not fit well into their society. They also said we might bring diseases that could hurt their people." Kethva closed his eyes. The Altarians were known for thinking they were better than everyone else. They only helped other species that looked like them or had technology they wanted. The Zilani had neither. "What about the Vex Collective?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. "Also no," replied Officer Morthka from across the room. "They ran their computers and decided that helping us would cost too much money. They said the math does not work. The Vex were machines that had once been living beings. They made every decision based on numbers and profit. To them, the Zilani were just another problem that was too expensive to solve." Kethva sat down heavily in his chair. "The Threnodi Empire? They will not even talk to us," Zarane said quietly. "They think we are not pure enough to live near them. The Threnodi were the worst of all. They believed that only certain types of beings deserved to live. They had destroyed entire worlds just because they did not like the people who lived there." Kethva was not surprised they said no, but it still hurt. For weeks they had sent messages to every major power in the galaxy. The beautiful Silthari said they had no room. The warrior Krogan claimed the Zilani were too weak to be worth saving. The ancient Kethmor said they were too busy with their own problems. Every door was closed to them. "Commander," said a young officer named Jeskto, "there is one more message we could send." "To whom?" Kethva asked, though he had little hope left. "The humans." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about humans, but they were not considered important. They had only been traveling between stars for about 100 years. Most of the galaxy thought of them as children playing with toys they did not understand. They had no great empire, no powerful weapons, no vast riches. "What could they do?" asked Zarane. "They are so small and weak compared to the others." Jeskto straightened up. "Maybe that is exactly why we should ask them." All the powerful ones said no. "Maybe the humans will think differently." Kethva considered this. The humans had a strange reputation in the galaxy. Other species often called them crazy, because they did things that did not make sense. They would fight wars they could not win. They would explore places that were too dangerous. They would try to save animals that were going extinct even when it cost them money. "Do we know anything else about them?" Kethva asked. "I have been reading about them," Jeskto said. "They have something they call the United Nations. When one part of their world has trouble, the others try to help. They have done this even when it was hard for them." "But we are not humans," Morthka pointed out. "Why would they care about us?" "I do not know," Jeskto admitted. "But what do we have to lose? If they say no, we are exactly where we are now." Kethva looked around the room at his people. They were tired, scared, and running out of hope. Maybe the humans would say no just like everyone else. But maybe, just maybe, they would be different. "Prepare a message," he said finally. "Send it to the human government on Earth. Tell them who we are and what is happening to us. Ask them if they can help." As the message was prepared, Kethva walked back to the window. Down below, another city had gone dark. The radiation was getting stronger. They were running out of time. The message was simple and honest. It told the humans about the dying sun and the Zilani people who would soon have nowhere to go. It explained that every other major power had said no. It asked without much hope if the humans might be willing to help. As the message traveled through space toward Earth, HFY wondered what kind of answer they would receive. Would the humans be like all the others? Would they make excuses about why they could not help? Or would they surprise everyone? On the communication screen, he could see other Zilani ships trying to find any planet that might take them. Some were heading to the edge of the galaxy, hoping to find empty worlds they could live on. Others were looking for asteroid belts where they might build new homes. But deep down, everyone knew these plans would not work. They did not have enough time or resources. HFY touched the window with his hand. The glass was warm from the radiation of their dying sun. Soon, this space station would have to move farther away and then farther still. Eventually, they would have to watch their beautiful world burn from a distance, knowing they could never return. He thought about his children, safe for now in the deep shelters. What kind of future could he give them? What kind of life would they have as refugees wandering the galaxy, unwanted by everyone? The message to Earth was sent. Now all they could do was wait and hope that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone would care enough to help. 3 days later, the first response from Earth arrived. HFY was sleeping when Zara Neigh woke him up. Her eyes were wide with excitement and disbelief. "Commander," she said, her voice shaking, "you need to see this message from the humans. You need to see it right now." Admiral Sarah Chen sat in her office on Luna Station, reading the Zilani message for the 5th time. The words were simple, but they hit her like a punch to the stomach. An entire species was going to die, and nobody in the galaxy wanted to help them. She looked out her window at Earth, the blue and green world spinning slowly in space. Humanity had been lucky. They had never faced anything like what the Zilani were going through. But Sarah could imagine how terrifying it must be to watch your home world die while everyone else turned their backs on you. Her aide, Lieutenant James Park, knocked on her door. "Admiral, the President is ready for the emergency meeting." Sarah nodded and walked to the secure communication room. On the big screen, she could see President Maria Santos, along with the leaders of every major nation on Earth. The Secretary General of the United Nations was there too, along with the heads of every space agency and military branch. "Thank you all for joining this emergency session," President Santos said. "Admiral Chen, please brief everyone on the situation." Sarah stood up and activated the hologram display. A 3-dimensional image of the Zilani solar system appeared in the center of the room. The dying star pulsed with angry red light. "3 days ago, we received this message from a species called the Zilani," Sarah began. She played the recording, and the musical voice of Commander HFY filled the room. Even though the words were translated by computer, everyone could hear the sadness and desperation. When the message ended, the room was quiet for a long moment. "How many people are we talking about?" asked the Prime Minister of Canada. 4,700,000,000, Sarah replied. "Their entire species." "That is more than half the population of Earth," whispered the President of Brazil. "Where would we put them all?" asked the Chancellor of Germany. "We do not have the space or resources for that many refugees." Sarah had expected this question. "We have been running calculations for the last 72 hours. It would not be easy, but it is possible. We have empty space stations that we could convert. We have colonies that are still growing and could use more people. We have ships that could be turned into temporary homes." "What about food?" asked the President of China. 4 billion people need a lot of food. The Zilani are plant eaters, Sarah explained. They have advanced farming technology that actually produces more food than they need. If we help them, they can help feed themselves and maybe even help us grow more food. The Secretary General leaned forward. "Admiral, what have the other major powers in the galaxy said about this?" Sarah's face became hard. Every single one of them said no. The Altarians think the Zilani are not good enough. The Vex Collective says it costs too much money. The Threnodi Empire will not even talk to them. Dozens of other species have made excuses. "So if we help them, we would be the only ones?" asked President Santos. "Yes, Madam President. We would be completely alone in this." Another long silence filled the room. Sarah could see the leaders thinking about all the problems this would cause. The cost would be enormous. It would change human society forever. There would be political fights and economic troubles. Finally, the old president of Kenya spoke up. I remember when I was a child, my village was hit by a terrible flood. We lost everything. Other villages could have helped us, but they said they had their own problems. We almost starved. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. But then people from the city came. They were not rich and they did not have much to spare. But they shared what they had with us. They helped us rebuild. I learned something that day. The size of your heart matters more than the size of your bank account. The Prime Minister of New Zealand nodded. We have always said that all people deserve basic human rights. If we believe that, should it not include people from other worlds too? But the risks, said the President of Russia. What if we cannot handle so many refugees? What if our economy crashes? What if there are diseases we do not know about? There are always risks, replied President Santos. The question is, can we live with ourselves if we do nothing? Sarah watched the debate go back and forth. Some leaders worried about the practical problems. Others talked about the moral duty to help. A few wondered what other species would think of humanity if they took on such a huge task. Then the President of Japan said something that changed everything. My country knows what it is like to rebuild after disaster. We know how hard it can be. But we also know that when people work together, amazing things can happen. Maybe this is our chance to show the galaxy what humans are really like. One by one, the leaders began to agree. It would be difficult. Maybe the hardest thing humanity had ever tried to do. But it was the right thing to do. President Santos looked around the room. All in favor of Operation Sanctuary? She asked. Every hand went up. Sarah felt her heart racing. In less than an hour, the leaders of Earth had agreed to attempt the largest rescue mission in galactic history. She thought about Commander HFY and his people, waiting in the darkness around their dying world. Soon they would have an answer. Admiral Chen, President Santos said, you are in charge of this operation. How quickly can we get ships to their system? We can have the first rescue ships there in 2 weeks if we push the engines hard, Sarah replied. But to move 4 billion people, we will need every ship we have and some we do not have yet. What do you mean? Asked the Secretary General. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. We are going to need help from everyone. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, research vessels, even private yachts. We are going to ask every human in space to join this mission. Within hours, the call went out across the solar system. Every ship captain, every space station commander, every colony leader received the same message. Humanity was going to save the Zilani, and they needed all the help they could get. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ship captains changed course toward Earth. Cargo vessels dumped their loads to make room for people. Luxury cruise ships that had been taking rich tourists to Mars suddenly became refugee transports. As Sarah watched the ships gathering around Earth, she sent a message back to Commander HFY. It was short and simple. We are coming. Hold on. But even as the largest fleet in human history prepared to launch, other messages were being sent across the galaxy. The Altarian ambassador contacted Earth directly. This is madness, Ambassador Zeph Prime told President Santos during a tense video call. You cannot possibly save that many people. You will destroy your own civilization trying. President Santos looked calmly at the tall, proud alien on her screen. We appreciate your concern, Ambassador, but we have made our decision. Think about what you are doing, Zeph Prime continued. These refugees will change your culture, strain your resources, and probably bring diseases. You are risking everything for people you have never met. Yes, President Santos replied simply. We are. The ambassador stared at her in confusion. Why? Because it is what we do, the president said, and ended the call. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Admiral Chen received reports from across the galaxy. The Vex Collective was running probability calculations on human failure. The Threnody Empire was already making plans to claim human territory after their expected collapse. Betting pools were forming among dozens of species, all wagering on how long it would take for humanity to give up. Sarah did not care what they thought. She had seen what humans could do when they worked together. She had seen them rebuild after disasters, explore impossible places, and help strangers for no reason except that it was right. The Zilani were about to discover what it meant to be helped by humanity. Captain Maria Rodriguez piloted her cargo ship through the red-tinted space around Kepler 4b. Behind her, 300 human vessels of every size and type formed the largest rescue fleet in galactic history. Warships flew next to garbage haulers. Luxury cruise ships traveled alongside mining vessels. Even small private yachts had joined the mission. "Holy hell," whispered her co-pilot Danny Kim as they got their first close look at the dying world below. The planet's surface glowed with radiation. Massive solar flares reached out from the unstable star like angry fingers trying to grab anything nearby. "Language, Danny," Maria said softly, but she understood his shock. The Zilani world was dying faster than anyone had expected. They had weeks, not months. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system to all ships. "This is Admiral Chen to all vessels. I know what you are seeing looks impossible. I know some of you are scared. But we did not come this far to give up now. Remember why we are here." Maria looked at the screen showing the evacuation zones. Millions of Zilani were waiting in underground shelters and orbital stations. Each person was someone's child, parent, or friend. Each one deserved a chance to live. "All civilian ships begin evacuation pattern Alpha," Admiral Chen continued. "Military vessels, prepare to shield the transports from solar radiation. Science ships start mapping the safest routes through the debris field." The work began immediately. Human ships dove toward the planet and its moons, racing against time and radiation. The Zilani had built amazing underground cities to protect themselves, but even those would not be safe much longer. Maria's ship was designed to carry mining equipment, but now it was fitted with temporary life support systems for refugees. As she approached the first pickup point, she saw Zilani evacuation craft waiting. The aliens looked so fragile in their thin spacesuits, but their large eyes showed incredible hope when they saw the human ships arriving. "Docking complete," announced her engineer, Lisa Santos. "Beginning passenger transfer." The first Zilani to board Maria's ship was an elderly female carrying a small child. The old alien looked around the cargo bay with wonder, then touched Maria's hand and spoke in her musical language. The translator device turned her words into English. "Thank you for giving us tomorrow." Maria felt tears in her eyes. "You are welcome here," she replied. For hours, the evacuation continued. Human ships loaded thousands of Zilani refugees, then raced back to the safety of the outer system. But as they worked, the dying star became more dangerous. Solar flares grew stronger and more frequent. Commander HFY was coordinating the evacuation from the main orbital station when the worst flare yet erupted from their sun. The radiation pulse was so strong it would destroy any ship caught in the open. "All human vessels, this is Commander HFY," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Massive solar event incoming. You must retreat to safe distance immediately." But Captain Sarah Mitchell of the destroyer HMS Defiant had just reached a shelter with 10,000 Zilani children inside. "Negative, Commander. We are not leaving without these kids. You will die if you stay," HFY warned. "The radiation will kill you." "Then we better work fast," Sarah replied. Across the system, human captains made the same choice. They stayed to save more people, even when it meant putting their own crews at risk. Some ships had their engines damaged by radiation. Others lost communication systems. The hospital ship USNS Mercy actually caught fire from a direct hit by solar particles, but her crew kept working to transfer wounded Zilani patients. Danny watched the radiation readings on his screen climb higher and higher. "Maria, we need to go. Now." "2 more minutes," Maria said, watching the last group of Zilani families boarding her ship. "Just 2 more minutes." The solar flare hit just as they cleared the atmosphere. Maria's ship shook like a toy in a hurricane. Alarms screamed warnings about hull breaches and system failures, but they were alive, and so were the 800 Zilani refugees in their cargo bay. "Damage report," Maria called out. "Port engine is dead. Life support is working at 60% and we have a hole in cargo bay 3, Lisa reported. "But we can make it to the rendezvous point." All across the evacuation zone, human ships were dealing with similar problems. But none of them gave up. When one ship's engines failed, another ship took its refugees. When a transport lost life support, a warship shared its air. The humans worked together like they were all part of one big family. The most amazing moment came when the cruise liner Pacific Dream was hit by debris and started losing atmosphere. The ship was carrying 5,000 Zilani refugees and was too damaged to reach safety. Captain John Martinez sent out a distress call, not asking for rescue for his crew but for help saving the aliens on board. 12 human ships immediately changed course to help. They docked with the damaged cruise liner and began transferring refugees, even though it put them all in danger. The Zilani watched in amazement as humans risked their lives to save people they had never met before. "I do not understand," said Dr. Nethka, a Zilani scientist, to Captain Rodriguez as they watched the rescue through a porthole. "Why do your people do this?" "We cannot pay you. We have nothing to offer in return." Maria thought about the question for a moment. "Where I come from, we have a saying, we are only as strong as our weakest neighbor. Maybe that is why." Dr. Nethka was quiet for a long time. "The other species in the galaxy, they care only about themselves. They help others only when it benefits them. But you are different." "Maybe," Maria said. "Or maybe we are just too stupid to know when something is impossible." The evacuation continued for 3 weeks. Every day brought new dangers as the Zilani sun became more unstable. Human ships worked around the clock, making trip after trip through radiation and debris. Some captains flew so many missions they fell asleep at their controls. Others pushed their engines so hard they burned out completely. The galaxy watched with fascination and disbelief. News reporters from dozens of species covered the story, trying to understand why the humans were doing something so crazy. The Altarian News called it a foolish waste of resources. The Vex Collective published analysis showing the mathematical impossibility of success. But the humans kept working. When they ran out of proper refugee ships, they converted cargo vessels. When those were full, they turned military ships into transports. Some captains even gave up their own quarters to make room for more Zilani families. The hardest part came during the final week. The Zilani sun was close to completely collapsing, and the radiation was so bad that ships could only stay in the system for a few hours at a time. There were still 2 million Zilani waiting for rescue, including thousands of children in the deepest shelters. "We are not going to make it," Admiral Chen told her staff during an emergency meeting. "We do not have enough time or ships." That was when something unexpected happened. Ships began arriving from across human space. Not military vessels or government transports, but civilian ships. Farmers from the agricultural colonies brought their cargo haulers. Miners from the asteroid belt sent their ore carriers. Even families with private spacecraft volunteered to help. A message came from Captain Zhang Wei of the freighter Lucky Dragon. "Admiral, we heard you needed more ships. The Outer Colony Merchant Guild is here to help. We brought 150 vessels and volunteer crews. More ships kept coming. The human government had not asked for them, but they came anyway." By the end of the rescue operation, over 1,000 human vessels were working to save the Zilani. It was the largest peaceful gathering of ships in human history. On the last day, as the Zilani sun began its final collapse, the last human ship cleared the system carrying the final refugees. Behind them, their beautiful world burned in the fires of their dying star. Commander Keith Voss stood on the bridge of Admiral Chen's flagship, watching his home disappear forever. But around him, 4.7 billion of his people were alive and safe aboard human ships. "I do not know how we can ever repay you," he said to Admiral Chen. Sarah smiled tiredly. "You already have. You trusted us when nobody else would help you. That means everything." As the human fleet began the long journey back to human space, messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Most were expressions of shock that the humans had actually succeeded. A few were offers of help for the refugees. But many were warnings that humanity had just made a terrible mistake that would destroy their civilization. Admiral Chen read the messages and deleted most of them. The humans had done what they set out to do. They had saved an entire species from extinction. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. 6 months after the Great Rescue, Ambassador Zeph Prime of the Altarian Federation arrived at Earth's Luna Station expecting to find chaos. Every computer model his people had run predicted the same thing. Human civilization should have collapsed under the weight of 4.7 billion refugees. Instead, he found something that made no sense. "This cannot be correct," he told his aide as they reviewed the data. "According to these reports, human productivity has increased by 30%. Their technology advancement rate has doubled. Their economic growth is the highest in recorded galactic history." The aide, a younger Altarian named Kefzar, checked the numbers again. "The data appears accurate, Ambassador. Perhaps our models were wrong." Zeph Prime made a sound of disgust. Altarian computer models were never wrong. They had predicted the fall of 17 different civilizations with perfect accuracy. Something else was happening here. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of New Eden, Farmer Tom Wilson was learning things about growing food that he never imagined possible. His new partner, Dr. Zelthma, had been a plant scientist on the Zilani homeworld. Together they had created crops that grew 3 times faster than anything humans had ever developed. The secret is in the root structure, Dr. Zelthma explained as they walked through fields of golden grain. We learned to grow food in very poor soil because our world was always difficult. Your soil is rich, so these plants grow amazing here. Tom nodded, still amazed by what they had accomplished. Back home in Iowa, my family's farm fed maybe 1,000 people. This farm feeds 100,000 and we are just getting started. The same thing was happening all across human space. Zilani engineers were working with human designers to create new types of spacecraft. Their understanding of gravity technology was centuries ahead of human science. Within months, they had helped humans build ships that could travel twice as fast as before. On Mars, Dr. Sarah Kim worked with Zilani physician Nethvor to develop new medical treatments. The Zilani had faced many diseases because of radiation from their dying sun. Their advanced knowledge of cellular repair was revolutionizing human medicine. We can now heal injuries that would have been permanent, Dr. Kim explained to the Earth Medical Council. Spinal cord damage, brain trauma, genetic disorders. The Zilani techniques make it all treatable. But the changes went deeper than technology. The presence of the Zilani was changing human culture in ways nobody expected. Their deep gratitude and strong work ethic inspired humans to work harder and help each other more. Dr. Zelthma often told Tom about Zilani philosophy. When someone saves your life, you owe them everything. But the best way to repay that debt is to help them save others. The Zilani did not just take from human society. They gave back more than they received. Zilani artists created beautiful music and paintings that moved humans to tears. Zilani teachers shared their knowledge freely. Zilani workers took jobs that humans did not want and did them with joy and pride. Most importantly, the Zilani remembered what it felt like to be rejected and hopeless. When other refugee species started arriving, the Zilani were the first to volunteer to help them. The Kethmar came next. Their homeworld was dying from a terrible plague that their doctors could not cure. Every other species in the galaxy turned them away, afraid of getting sick. But the Human-Zilani Alliance welcomed them and used Zilani medical knowledge to find a cure. Then came the Nethys, an ocean-dwelling species whose water world had been destroyed by mining companies. They needed new oceans to live in, and humans had several water worlds that were not being used. The Zilani helped design underwater cities where the Nethys could thrive. Each new species brought their own knowledge and skills. The Kethmar were amazing at recycling and waste management. The Nethys understood ocean ecology better than anyone. Soon, human worlds were becoming centers of learning and cooperation between different species. Ambassador Zeph Prime watched all this happen with growing confusion and anger. According to everything the Altarians believed, taking in refugees was supposed to make a civilization weaker. Instead, humanity was becoming stronger every day. He demanded a meeting with Admiral Chen, who had been promoted to Secretary General of what was now called the Humanitarian Coalition. I do not understand what is happening here, Zeph Prime said as he sat in Sarah's office overlooking the busy Luna Station docks. You should have collapsed months ago. Your economy should be ruined. Your society should be falling apart. Sarah smiled as she watched Zilani and human workers loading supplies for another rescue mission. Why? Because we helped people who needed help? Because you took on an impossible burden, Zeph Prime replied. No civilization can support that many refugees without destroying itself. Maybe that is true if you think of refugees as a burden, Sarah said. We think of them as new family members. Zeph Prime stared at her. Family members? The Zilani are not just people we rescued, Sarah explained. They are part of us now. Their children go to school with our children. Their scientists work with our scientists. Their artists make our culture more beautiful. They do not take from us, they add to us. But the cost, Zeph Prime began. What cost? Sarah interrupted. Yes, we spent money to save them, but they have helped us earn back 10 times what we spent. More importantly, we gained something you cannot put a price on. We learned what we can accomplish when we work together. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, he could see ships from dozens of different species working together. Human engineers worked alongside Zilani gravity specialists and Kethmar recycling experts. Children from 5 different worlds played together in the station's parks. The Galactic Council has been discussing your activities, Zeph Prime said finally. Some members are concerned about this humanitarian coalition you have created. Concerned about what? Sarah asked. About the precedent you are setting. If other civilizations start thinking they should help refugees instead of turning them away, it could change the entire galaxy. Sarah leaned back in her chair and studied the proud Altarian. Would that be such a bad thing? It would be chaos, Zeph Prime said quickly. There must be order. There must be standards. Not every species can be allowed to live anywhere they want. Why not? Sarah asked simply. The question seemed to confuse Zeph Prime. Because that is not how things work. The strong rule, the weak serve, and everyone stays in their proper place, and says who? Zeph Prime opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. He had never really thought about who decided these rules or why they had to be followed. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. 6 months ago, everyone in the galaxy agreed that saving the Zilani was impossible. Everyone except us. We proved them wrong. Maybe we can prove them wrong about other things too, such as the idea that different species cannot live together in peace. Such as the idea that helping others makes you weaker instead of stronger. Such as the idea that there is not enough room in the galaxy for everyone. Zeph Prime left the meeting more confused than ever. Everything he had been taught about how the galaxy worked was being challenged by what he saw on human worlds. His confusion grew worse when he received a message from his home government. The Altarian Federation was facing a crisis. Their birth rate had been falling for centuries because their society was so focused on genetic purity that fewer and fewer Altarians were considered worthy to have children. They were slowly going extinct. At the same time, the Vex Collective was discovering that their purely logical approach to everything was causing problems. They had become so focused on efficiency that they had stopped innovating or creating anything new. Their civilization was stagnating. The Threnody Empire was having the worst problems of all. Their hatred of other species had left them completely isolated. They had no trade partners, no allies, and no new ideas. Their empire was collapsing from within. Meanwhile, the humanitarian coalition was growing stronger every day. New species were asking to join. Technology was advancing rapidly. Art and culture were flourishing. The humans and their allies were becoming a major power in the galaxy. For the first time in his long life, Ambassador Zeph Prime began to wonder if everything his people believed was wrong. 2 years after the Zilani rescue, the old Galactic Council building on Centauri Prime looked emptier than ever. Only half the seats were filled for what was supposed to be an important meeting. The other half belonged to species that had joined something new, the Humanitarian Coalition. Council leader Vorth Prime of the Altarian Federation stood at the center podium, his tall frame rigid with frustration. We are here today to discuss the human problem, he announced to the remaining council members. What problem? Asked Representative Kex-9 of the Vex Collective, his mechanical voice flat and emotionless. According to our calculations, humans have been highly successful in all their endeavors. That is exactly the problem, Vorth Prime snapped. They have upset the natural order of the galaxy. Species that should know their place are now demanding equal treatment. Refugees expect to be welcomed instead of turned away. The weak are acting like they deserve the same respect as the strong. In the back of the chamber, Ambassador Zeph Prime listened to the debate with growing unease. Over the past 2 years, he had watched his own people struggle while humanity thrived. The Altarian Federation was facing problems they had never seen before, while the humans seemed to solve every challenge that came their way. Just that morning, he had received news that made his heart heavy. Another Altarian colony had been abandoned because there were not enough young people to keep it running. Meanwhile, human colonies were expanding so fast they could barely build new cities quick enough. We must take action, declared Ambassador Krextor of the Threnody Empire. The humans are making the galaxy soft. They are teaching species that they deserve help when they face difficulties. This weakness will destroy us all. Perhaps, said a new voice from the entrance. The problem is not that the galaxy has become too soft, but that some of us have become too hard. Everyone turned to see Secretary General Sarah Chen walking into the chamber, followed by a delegation that included Zilani Commander Keth Va, Kethmar Chief Scientist Yevka, and Nethys Speaker of the Depths Choral Song. You were not invited to this meeting, Fourth Prime said coldly. No, Sarah agreed, as she took a seat in the visitors section. But we thought you might want to hear what we have to say before you make any decisions about the human problem. Sarah stood up and looked around the half-empty chamber. 2 years ago, you all told the Zilani that saving them was impossible. You said that helping refugees would destroy any civilization that tried it. You were wrong. She activated a holographic display that showed maps and statistics from across the galaxy. The Humanitarian Coalition now includes 47 different species living and working together. Our technology advancement rate is the highest in galactic history. Our economic growth has created prosperity for billions of beings. Our cultural achievements have produced art, music, and literature that inspire people across 1,000 worlds. And what has it cost you? Fourth Prime demanded. You must be exhausted from supporting so many different species. Your resources must be nearly gone. Commander HFY stood up. May I answer that? He asked in his musical voice. Sarah nodded, and the Zilani commander activated his own display. The humans saved 4.7 billion of my people from extinction. In return, we have helped them increase their food production by 400%. Our gravity technology has made their ships twice as fast. Our medical knowledge has eliminated 17 diseases that used to kill human children. Chief Scientist Yefka of the Kethmar added her own information. When the plague nearly destroyed my species, the Coalition welcomed us and helped us find a cure. In gratitude, we have shared our recycling technology, which has eliminated waste problems on hundreds of worlds and created new industries worth trillions of credits. Speaker Coral Song of the Nethys spoke in her flowing, water-like voice. When mining companies destroyed our ocean worlds, we thought we would die in the void of space. The Coalition gave us new seas to live in. In return, we have helped them understand ocean ecosystems so well that they can now grow food in water as efficiently as on land. You see, Sarah said, the cost of helping others is not as high as you think, and the benefits are much greater than anyone imagined. Fourth Prime shook his head stubbornly. These are temporary gains. Eventually, the burden of supporting so many different species will crush your civilization. Will it? Sarah asked. Let me tell you what happened last month. A species called the Mortai sent us a distress call. Their star was going nova, and they needed to evacuate 12 billion people. According to your logic, that should have been impossible for us to handle. She showed images of the massive rescue operation. We evacuated all 12 billion Mortai in 3 weeks. Not just with human ships, but with vessels from every species in the Coalition. The Zilani provided the gravity technology to move people quickly. The Kethmar handled the logistics of feeding and housing refugees. The Nethys offered their ocean worlds as temporary shelters. 47 different species worked together to save another one. The chamber was completely silent, and now, Sarah continued, the Mortai are sharing their knowledge of stellar engineering with us. They can actually extend the life of dying stars. Think about what that means for the galaxy. Representative Kex 9 of the Vex Collective spoke up. Our probability matrices did not account for this level of cooperation between species. We calculated benefits based on individual civilizations, not collaborative alliances. Exactly, Sarah said. You have been thinking about the galaxy as a collection of separate groups competing against each other. We think about it as one big community working together. Ambassador Zeph Prime found himself standing up before he realized what he was doing. Secretary General Chen, I have a question. Yes, Ambassador. The Altarian Federation is facing some difficulties. Our population is declining and our economy is struggling. If we were to express interest in joining your coalition, would we be welcome? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the chamber knew that the Altarians had been among the strongest opponents of helping refugees. They had spent centuries preaching genetic superiority and racial purity. Sarah looked at Zeph Prime for a long moment. Ambassador, if your people are willing to work with others instead of looking down on them, if you are willing to help species in need instead of turning them away, if you are willing to learn that strength comes from cooperation, not domination, then yes, you would be welcome. But what about our past behavior? Zeph Prime asked quietly. We have said terrible things about other species. We have refused to help people who needed it. We have. The past is the past, Commander HFY interrupted gently. What matters is what you choose to do now. One by one, other species began asking similar questions. The Vex Collective wanted to know if machines could learn to value things besides pure logic. The Kethmore asked if ancient species could find new purposes in helping younger ones. Even Ambassador Krextor of the Thrinodi Empire seemed interested, though he tried to hide it. Hypothetically, he said, if a species wanted to change its ways but did not know how to begin, what would you suggest? Sarah smiled. Start small. Help one refugee family. Learn one new thing from another species. Make one friend who is different from you. Big changes begin with small steps. The meeting that was supposed to discuss the human problem became something completely different. It became a conversation about joining the solution. 3 months later, the Galactic Council building was officially converted into the Coalition Embassy. The old council chambers became meeting rooms where dozens of species worked together to solve problems and help each other. Ambassador Zeph Prime, now representing the Altarian Federation within the Coalition, stood in what used to be the council leader's office. Through the window, he could see ships from 100 different worlds working together in space. Children from 50 species played in the parks below. It is strange, he said to Sarah, who had come to visit. My people always believed that mixing with other species would make us weaker and less pure. Instead, we have become stronger and more interesting than we ever were alone. Sarah nodded. That is what happens when you stop worrying about being better than everyone else and start focusing on being better with everyone else. Commander HFY joined them at the window. Do you remember what you asked me 2 years ago when we first met? He said to Sarah. You wanted to know how we could ever repay you for saving us. I remember. I think I have the answer now, HFY said, gesturing toward the busy spaceport below. We repaid you by helping you save others, and they will repay us by helping us save even more. It is a circle that grows bigger and stronger with each turn. As Sarah watched a human child teaching a group of young aliens how to play soccer, she thought about how much the galaxy had changed. 2 years ago, most species barely talked to each other. Now they were building a civilization together. It had all started with one simple idea. When someone needs help, you help them. Not because you have to, not because you will get something in return, but because it is the right thing to do. The galaxy was discovering that doing the